you're abandoning your family. And so that can be an argument used against a parent that leaves. I'm a little curious why you're so wanting me so aggressively to move out of here too, and not let the system play out, and why you're feeling like you have to get some motion to remove me from here.
Our kids have mentioned, especially our older two, have mentioned that when you're here, it is more tense.
That right now they're kind of taking your side to help provide and trying to be a good husband for you. And I'm sorry I have fallen short in ways.
You do need help. I hope you can get it. I want you to.
I want it. I've told you.
I deserve to be treated so much better. Cannot continue to tolerate the way you have treated me.
It started like any other winter morning in a quiet Utah neighborhood. But by the time police walked through the front door, 8 lives were gone. A mother, her 5 children, and her own mother, each shot at close range. The killer? The man they trusted most. On the surface, Michael Haight was a devoted father, a church-going husband. But behind closed doors, he was unraveling. And just days after his wife filed for divorce, he made a decision that would shock the country. He left behind a chilling suicide note, and one haunting question: how long had he been planning to kill them all? The Haight family home sat quietly on Albert Drive in Enoch, Utah, a modest 2-story house with a snow-dusted roof and Christmas lights still clinging to the eaves. Just days into the new year, festive decorations remained untouched, as if time had paused inside that house. But on January 4th, 2023, that stillness was shattered. When officers stepped inside for a welfare check, they weren't prepared for what they found. Every member of the household, Tasha Haight, her mother Gail Earl, and her 5 children, Macy, Briley, Ammon, Sienna, and Gavin, were dead. Each had been shot. Each left exactly where they had fallen. And the man responsible, Michael Haight, the family's father and husband, was among the dead. His own gun used to end his life after taking theirs. To neighbors, the Haights were a model Latter-day Saint family. Michael had served a religious mission in Brazil. He coached his kids' sports teams. He smiled in family photos. There were no loud arguments, no police calls, at least none the public could see. They were, by all appearances, normal, respectable, safe. But then a letter surfaced. A suicide note, left behind by Michael Haight himself. In it, he accused his wife of manipulation. He claimed she had control over his life. He wrote, "I would rather rot in hell than to put up with another day of this." Authorities later released a 57-page investigative report. It painted a far more disturbing picture, one where Michael Haight wasn't the victim of control, but the one imposing it. He had removed all firearms from the home just weeks before the murders. He was under investigation for child abuse. And he had been secretly searching online for phrases like, "gunshot in a house." Still, neighbors said they didn't see it coming. That's what makes this case so chilling. The danger wasn't hiding in the shadows. It was sitting at the dinner table, smiling in church, posing for Christmas cards. Michael Haight didn't just commit murder. He staged a massacre and tried to spin the narrative from beyond the grave. So what happened inside that home? What pushed a father of 5 to annihilate his entire family? And why did no one see the warning signs until it was far too late? Tasha Haight was the kind of woman people called selfless. Friends described her as soft-spoken, generous, and deeply committed to her children. She rarely said a bad word about anyone. She volunteered often, stayed active in her church, and by all accounts, poured everything she had into raising her family. She had 5 children, each one different, each one adored. Macy, 17, was bright and thoughtful, with college in her sights. Briley, 12, loved science and had a shy but curious energy. Ammon, just 7, had a laugh that filled a room. Sienna, also 7, was Ammon's twin, gentle and playful. And Gavin, the youngest, only 4 years old, was full of energy and adored by his siblings. The children attended 4 different schools across the Iron County School District. Teachers, classmates, and school officials described them as respectful, engaged, and well-loved. After the tragedy, the district released a statement expressing their sorrow, mobilizing a crisis response team to provide therapy and support to devastated classmates and staff. Tasha's mother, 78-year-old Gail Earl, had recently moved into the home. Not because she had to, but because her daughter needed her. Tasha had filed for divorce from Michael Haight just 2 weeks earlier, on December 21, 2022. It was a difficult decision after years of marriage, but according to relatives, it was also a necessary one. She had grown fearful of her husband's behavior. Michael had reportedly become increasingly irritable, controlling, and volatile behind closed doors. Friends said he was fixated on appearances, concerned more with what the neighbors thought than how his family was actually doing. The divorce wasn't a quiet one. Tasha's family had encouraged her to protect herself and her kids. Gail had stepped in to support them, offering stability, comfort, and strength while they prepared to move forward. There were warning signs. In retrospect, they seemed painfully clear. But in the moment, they were buried beneath years of practiced smiles and social pleasantries. Tasha didn't advertise her pain. She tried to manage it. She tried to hold the family together, even as Michael's behavior became more alarming. To the outside world, she was still the devoted wife, the doting mother. But inside the walls of their home, she was preparing to leave a man she no longer recognized. And her children, each at a tender stage in life, were caught in the middle of something no child should ever have to witness. It was just after 4 p.m. on January 4, 2023, when officers in Enoch City arrived at the Haight residence to perform a welfare check. Tasha's family had called police after she failed to show up for an appointment. They hadn't heard from her, or the children, all day. What they walked into would haunt the department forever. 7 bodies lay scattered across the home. Each had been shot execution style. Each was found near bedrooms or gathering areas, as if they had been ambushed, one by one, before they had a chance to react. Tasha Haight, her mother Gail, and all 5 children, Macy, Briley, Ammon, Sienna, and Gavin. None survived. Michael Haight's body was discovered nearby, a handgun close to his side. It was clear from the scene, he had killed them all, then turned the gun on himself. There were no signs of a struggle. No desperate calls to 911. No neighbors had reported hearing gunshots, likely muffled by the house's structure and the layout of the residential neighborhood. Authorities believe the massacre occurred in the early morning hours, while the family was still asleep, or just waking up. But what made the scene even more chilling was what wasn't there. There were no other firearms in the house. According to documents released by the city of Enoch, Michael had previously removed all weapons from the home after the child abuse investigation began. It was a calculated move, one that left Tasha and the children defenseless. Investigators would later learn that Michael had conducted internet searches for gunshot in the house before the killings. That detail, found in the official 57-page report released by the city, suggested planning, not a moment of rage, but a series of steps leading toward mass murder. Even more disturbing, Michael had written a suicide note. In it, he blamed Tasha for everything. He accused her of manipulation, of control. He said he was begging for help, and no one listened. And he ended with a line that echoed through the investigation. "I would rather rot in hell than to put up with another day of this." Investigators and local officials rejected that narrative almost immediately. Based on witness interviews, text messages, and family communications, the picture that emerged wasn't of a man being controlled, but a man losing control, furious that he couldn't maintain his grip on the family image he had cultivated for years. He didn't just kill his wife. He killed the people who knew him best, the ones who had seen behind the mask. And he did it in the house where they had celebrated birthdays, hosted Christmas, played board games on Sunday nights. A house where light once lived, now a permanent crime scene. Michael Haight was the kind of man who demanded control over his image, his family, and the story others told about him. In public, he was clean-cut, devout, and dependable. He served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Brazil. He held a job in insurance. He coached his kids' sports teams. He smiled in every family photo. But behind closed doors, something darker was building. According to the City of Enoch's 57-page investigative report, Michael had been under official investigation for child abuse. Multiple sources, including his own daughter Macy, told investigators that he was violent, controlling, and emotionally abusive. Macy reported that he would often get mad over little things, that he threw her to the floor once, and that she feared for her younger siblings' safety. He denied all of it. But the cracks were showing. Court documents reveal that just 2 weeks before the murders, Tasha had filed for divorce, a move that reportedly pushed Michael into a deeper spiral. Friends say he was obsessed with appearances. He couldn't tolerate the idea of his family life looking broken. Tasha's decision to leave him didn't just challenge his authority, it shattered the illusion he worked so hard to maintain. Investigators uncovered chilling digital evidence. Michael had searched online for gunshot in a house. He removed all firearms from the home, except the one he would eventually use. He was isolating Tasha and the children, cutting off resources, tightening his grip. And then there was the suicide note. In it, Michael tried to reclaim the narrative. He portrayed himself as the victim. He wrote that his wife was manipulative, that no one would listen to him, that he had asked for help, but had been ignored. But the actual evidence painted a very different picture. Interviews with friends, relatives, and community members described Michael as controlling, not controlled. Threatening, not threatened. His obsession with power, inside the home and in the eyes of his church and community, drove his actions. He had lost control over his wife. He had lost the grip on how his children saw him. He had lost the ability to maintain the image he had crafted. And for a man like Michael Haight, losing control didn't just feel like failure, it felt like annihilation. So he made a final, monstrous decision. If he couldn't own the story, he would end it. All of it. At first glance, Michael Haight didn't fit the profile of a family annihilator. No arrest record. No open history of violence. No signs of financial ruin or substance abuse. He was a former missionary. A clean-cut insurance agent. A father of 5. But as investigators pulled back the curtain, a twisted truth emerged. Michael hadn't simply snapped. He had spent years rehearsing control, mastering the performance of perfection, while quietly erasing the voices that dared challenge him. The biggest twist in the case wasn't just the scale of the violence. It was how well he'd hidden the truth, until the very end. The 57-page investigative report revealed that just before the murders, Michael had started deleting digital records, messages, online searches, files. Even his LinkedIn profile vanished. It was a deliberate effort to scrub his legacy, to control how he would be remembered, even in death. Meanwhile, Tasha and her family were growing increasingly concerned. In the weeks before the killings, she had told relatives about Michael's behavior. She feared for her safety. That's why her mother, Gail Earl, had moved in. Not out of convenience, but out of protection. Tasha was preparing to separate. To break free. She was working with her attorney. She had filed for divorce. She was taking all the right steps. But Michael was always one step ahead. Not legally. Not rationally. But in the way only an abuser can be, calculating the emotional terrain, isolating his victims, making sure no one could stop what he had already decided to do. And in the end, he left behind a suicide note, cold, bitter, self-justifying, blaming everyone but himself. Yet the documents, interviews, and testimonies all said the same thing: he was the threat. Not Tasha. Not the kids. Not the divorce. He had been given chances to change. He had been confronted. He had been investigated. But instead of facing accountability, he chose eradication. It was never about love. It was never about desperation. It was about control. And when he lost it, he destroyed everything around him. In the days that followed, Enoch City came to a standstill. Grief settled over the community like fog. Candlelight vigils were held. Families wept in school parking lots. Neighbors left flowers and teddy bears on the snow-covered lawn of a home that would never again echo with children's laughter. Mayor Jeffrey Chestnut, whose own sons had played with the Haight children, choked back tears during a press conference. "The youngest children were always playing in my yard," he said. "This hits very close to home." The Iron County School District dispatched grief counselors and crisis response teams to 4 different schools. Classrooms stood half empty. Desks once filled by Briley, Ammon, Sienna, and Gavin sat untouched. A community of students, some barely old enough to spell their own names, were now learning what it meant to lose friends to violence. But amid the mourning, something else stirred: anger. How did no one see this coming? Michael Haight had been under investigation for child abuse. Tasha had filed for divorce. A welfare check had been requested just that morning. Why wasn't there more urgency? Why wasn't there a safety plan? Had the system failed Tasha and her children? Even more chilling, Michael's obituary, posted online shortly after the murders, made no mention of the victims. It described him as a father, a businessman, a man of faith. It praised his achievements. Not one word about the lives he stole. Not one line for Tasha, or Macy, or Briley, or the twins, or little Gavin. It was later removed. But the damage was done. In the wake of the killings, Utah lawmakers and domestic violence advocates began demanding reform. Stricter protocols around abuse investigations. Earlier intervention when children report violence at home. Better access to protective services when a parent files for divorce in an abusive household. But no policy can undo what happened inside that house. No court ruling can return 5 innocent children. No legislation can fill the hole left in a grandmother's church pew. No words can fully explain why a man so obsessed with control would choose mass murder as his final act. The final, brutal question still lingers. If someone shows you who they are in silence, in fear, in withdrawal, in whispered warnings, will we listen before it's too late? Because in this case, the red flags were everywhere. And still, no one made it out alive.